Now, before we can really take advantage of the PowerPivot tool and start to create pivot tables based off of multiple sources with relationships, we need to create what's called a data model. And really, at its surface, all the data model is a list. Whether it's a single list, such as customer info, or it's multiple lists, like customer info and order info, and a relationship built between those lists. At its surface, again, that's all it is. It's just a list. So let's take a look at how we can create a data model that contains our two lists, order info and customer info, just the two tabs down below, and create a relationship between those two lists within our data model. All right, so first step, I'm going to go to my customer info tab, and I'm going to go up to my PowerPivot tab at the top of my screen. Now, on my newly installed PowerPivot tab, I've got a few features here. I've got things that I can utilize to be able to work with this list as a data model. Well, my first step is I need to add this list to my data model. So up on the PowerPivot tab, I've got a section called Tables, and I'm going to click on Add to Data Model. I'll give that a click. And I've now created a data model that contains a single list, a single set of data. Now, when I click that button, it does open up a completely separate window from Excel. This is my PowerPivot for Excel tool. And inside of here, it's got its own ribbon with its own tools. I've got an exact duplicate of the list that lives back inside of my Excel worksheet. It's just a link. It's a link from that Excel document into PowerPivot, into this data model. Now, this is just one source. Okay? I need to go back into Excel. So let me just pop back into Excel here. I'm going to go to my Order Info tab, and I need to add this one to the data model as well. So I'll click into my list. I'm going to go back up to my PowerPivot tab, and I'm going to add this one to the data model as well. So I'll give that a click. So it'll take just a moment. And now, let's maximize my PowerPivot window. I've now got both customer info and order info as lists inside of this Excel PowerPivot data model. So they're both inside of here. Here's my customer info. It's, again, an exact duplicate of the data that lives back inside of my Excel document. And there's my order info. If you watched the introductory video to this PowerPivot tool, we saw the ALF key customer ID inside of there. Exact duplicate. This is the order information. Now, these are two different sets of data, two different lists, all part of one data model. Now we can work with these lists together. But in order to do that and do it effectively, I need to create a relationship between these two lists. I need to tell it how customers is related to their specific orders. Well, in the previous lecture, we talked about how each customer contains a customer ID. ALF key, Anatar, Anton, and so on, just in some type of an abbreviation of their company name. And the order info also contains the customer ID field with all those same values. So we've got this common field between these two data sets that we can now link together. Now, just an FYI, if you're a Microsoft Access user or some type of database user, you're probably familiar with this concept. If you're not database users, Microsoft Access user, this might be a bit foreign to you. The idea, though, is we have a common value, a common field between both data sources that we can now link through. So let's take a look at how we can create the relationship or the link between these two data sets. So now, inside of my PowerPivot tool, I'm going to change the way I'm viewing my data model. On the Home tab, top of my screen, far right, you got a section called View. And I'm currently looking at it as Data View. It's much like Excel. I'm just looking at the data sets. Well, just to the right of that, I've got my Diagram View. And I'll give that a click. This is going to take me into what they refer to as Diagram View, where I can see the two different data sets or the two different tables. Just expanding these out so I can see all of the fields. This is just all the column headers, all the fields that live in those two lists. And I can find inside the customer info table, I've got customer ID. And in the order info table, I've got customer ID. So now I'm going to create the relationship. All I'm going to do is grab customer ID, left click from one table and drag it to customer ID in the other table. And I'll let go. Give it just a moment, and I have now created a relationship between these two tables. It's as simple as that. I've added the data sets to the data model through PowerPivot. I've got two different data sets in there, customer info, order info. I can go back to data view to be able to see this data. Once I've got the data sets in the data model, I can then create the relationships. I can go to diagram view, just click and drag. You're grabbing those common fields that exist inside of both data sets and just linking them. Drag and drop. You've created the relationship. So we've now created a data model. I can close out of the Excel PowerPivot tool, get back into Excel. Now behind the scenes, we've got this data model that I can now start to report off of. And that's what we're going to talk about next. But first, try this out. Open up the exercise file, create the data model through your PowerPivot tool. Just add the customer info, add the order info to your data model, and then go into the diagram view and create the relationship. So try that first, and then we'll take a look at how we can create the pivot table based off of that data model.